All right, Wendy, could you introduce our speaker who's put up with us all this time?
Yes. So tonight we have with us Bevan Allen, and she is with Compass Mark. They are an organization that's been in our community for over 50 years, and they're focused on the prevention of addiction through education and skill building and community mobilization. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and she's going to share a little bit about their organization as well as, kind of how their resiliency is pushing through right now at this time with COVID-19. So Bevan, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome.
Bevan,
thank you, Wendy.
Bevan,
thank you, guys.
Before you start, can everybody just put themselves on mute because I hear all sorts of little background. Sorry. Thank you.
It's important. I feel like I'm spending my life on Zoom right now, and so I can sympathize with that. It's I've heard crying babies and trains, all sorts of things these past few weeks. Let's see. Oh, I'm gonna pop over here and attempt to share my screen. Oh, let's see. We can switch whoever's sharing. There we go. Now we're in good shape. How's that, guys? All right. Almost set up. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me today. Like Wendy said, I am the Director of Operations at Compass Mark, and I'm really honored to be a part of your Rotary meeting this week to share some bits of presentation, a longer presentation on the topic of addiction prevention. This is really important right now because COVID-19 is really impacting every area of our community, our individual lives, health, employment, our social life. And the work that we do at Compass Mark really is the work of balancing our risk and our protective factors. So this is a risk that is impacting all of us right now. And that means prevention really needs to ramp up. We need to be doing our work. We need to do more of it, and we need to do it very, very well, which we're finding is complicated in a constantly moving landscape and unpredictable environment. Let's see. You may be familiar-ish with Compass Mark. We've been in Lancaster County for over 50 years. We started out as the Lancaster chapter of the National Council on Alcoholism, and along the road, we sort of were pared down to just being known as the Council. We were over on Janet Ave, across from Lancaster Catholic High. And then in about 2008, we changed our name to Compass Mark. And that name really has significance for us because we believe in meeting people where we find them on their path, and really guide and empower them along the path that they choose, which hopefully is one of health and resilience. We do a couple different things at Compass Mark in the work of prevention. We have what we refer to as our Addiction Resource Center. So folks call us and say, I have a loved one who's experiencing some issues with substance use, and maybe I'm not coping well and need some counseling, or I'm trying to find the language that can help them move closer to being ready for treatment. That line is available Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, and we have really wonderful, skilled folks who answer that help number. We do a lot of school-based prevention. We really see hundreds of kiddos throughout the course of the school year. It's really important to get in front of kids and do this work of primary prevention, because what we're doing is giving them the skills that they need to be able to respond to what we like to call their moment of choice. So that's the choice between using a substance and not using a substance. We want them to have built the connection in their brain to sort of exercise a muscle more than just saying no and running away, really being able to be a leader and even hopefully take other kiddos with them in those moments. We also do a significant amount of what we're referring to as community-based prevention. So we have a program called Skills for Life that's been around for about 30 years. working with kiddos who are already experimenting and maybe have gotten into some trouble with substances. Our Family Services Advocate program is another fantastic one that is probably my favorite, but don't tell my staff. They work with kiddos who have parents that are incarcerated in Lancaster County Prison. That work of prevention, getting in there early and making sure that they have access to primary needs like medical care, which they lose when their parent becomes incarcerated, as well as any other public assistance they may have had, and making sure that they're with a safe person. Usually a handoff is quick after a parent's arrest, and maybe they're not landing in the best spot. There's really not a lot of follow-up for them. So that's a phenomenal program. We also have our Community Prevention Mobilizer program, and they provide, the gentleman's name is Xavier, and he does technical assistance to groups all across our county who are trying to make a positive change in their community. There's a nice map of some of Xavier's work. All of those groups plus one that we are about to add are folks that he's in regular contact with. So he's our professional meeting goer. He goes out and helps them evaluate what they're doing and help them do it better. I do want to take a quick second to say thank you, because in having conversation with my executive director this morning about this evening's presentation, he shared with me that there were Elizabethtown Rotary dollars that went to joining forces last summer, which were used to support many coalitions to these groups across our community. And their work is wrapping up currently. We're working with them to make sure that they've achieved things that they had set out to achieve and formulating their final reports. So I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to share a lot of that good work with you guys. It means a lot to empower a community to care for itself, because no one can do it better than the people who make it. So thank you. All right, so prevention, right, is a word that probably we're familiar with, something that happens if something else doesn't happen, essentially. But at Compass Mark, we really like to view it as both an activity, but really also a practice within public health. And every sort of area of public health has its own method of prevention. You may have had conversation with your doctors, perhaps about a risk for diabetes or heart disease. Those are all medical prevention efforts. So prevention of drug addiction looks similar. Addiction is a disease. There is science out there to support it. For a long time, really was debated, but thanks to the field of public health, we've really been able to boil it down and do a lot of good research to show what's happening in the brain when addiction sort of presents itself. Harvard has done a lot of really fantastic research in relationship to that. What we've learned is that half of any individual's risk for addiction is predetermined by their genetics. So we're all born with like certain risks for diseases, and addiction is one of them. Whether or not we end up having a substance use disorder relates directly to how our living risk factors inside of us are interacting with our environment, whether they're sort of woken up or not. So that has been a really important area for us over the last year to be having conversations, especially with schools, to sort of bring the level of comfort for having that conversation around, because the more we can talk about it in our own families and our communities, the more we can normalize the importance of that conversation instead of running from it. We have a really nice visual that we like to share about the work that we do. There's a story about fisher people, and they're fishing at the bottom of this stream, and they see people bobbing up and down the water, floating by them, and they're pulling them out. And after a while, they think to themselves, man, we are wasting so much time pulling folks out of this water. let's go upstream and see where they're coming from. How are they getting in there in the first place? So they debate and they decide that they're going to put up a wall so that the folks peering over to look for fish aren't falling in. And that work of that primary prevention, stopping people from starting to struggle in the water, really is the work that we do at Compass Mark. Compass Mark has a lot of really cool fact sheets up on our website at compassmark.org. We love that prevention is a really smart investment. For every dollar we spend, $18 saved. And it looks like a lot of different ways that it can be saved, but that's a pretty fantastic return. I think we're learning a lot about our local approaches, our state and federal approaches to public health. And this is one for us in prevention that's always been a really clear question. Why is prevention so underfunded? And I think that moving forward, unfortunately, this experience has given us an opportunity to highlight that and sort of broaden that conversation to increase prevention. It's a really fantastic investment. There's a continuum of care that exists in the drug and alcohol world, and we're just one slice of sort of what we call our protractor. Promotion happens throughout, and what that means is that we're always talking about wellness and whole person being, and positively about our friends in treatment and recovery and vice versa, acknowledging that together we do the best work and we can inform each other when really strong partnerships and collaborations exist. You may be most familiar with prevention when we talk about DARE. DARE is an oldie that I was a DARE kid. I'm almost 40, but we have really learned a lot over the last 50, 60 years in prevention. And the best thing that came out of DARE actually was the relationships that were built between police officers and the kiddos in their community. So a lot of the other things they did didn't really pan out well, and the DARE generation actually have one of the higher rates of substance use, consequently. But we took the really good things from that program and they reinvested it into research that informed some of the really great stuff that we do today. I had mentioned that prevention really is increasing protection and lowering risks. You might have picked up by now that the basic principle is just that, this sort of balancing act. Every time something positive happens, I was listening to sort of just the fun banter you guys were having and the happy dollars. Having those moments of connection are actually a protective factor for all of you. So throughout your day, whether you were at work, maybe you had a vacation day, good things and bad things happen, but every time something positive happens that fires up our reward system, we're a little bit more protected than we were previously. We like to talk about the 4 domains that prevention happens in. This is why Compass Mark tries to spread ourselves out. We like to work in schools and communities because that's where we have access to peers, individuals, and families. But it's important for you guys as a Rotary Club to know that you're a really important part. Your domain as an organization is in that community, and the work that you guys do is really wonderful protective factor work. Risk factors, on the other hand, they vary. They actually have some consistencies. You'll see there Lancaster and Lebanon are both shown because we serve both counties as the primary provider of prevention, and they have some similarities. These are concerns for us, especially right now in under the stay-at-home orders. We're worried about folks not being that attached to their community. The family management was one of our higher risk factors. And of course, depression now being increased by isolation, something else we're concerned about. But the good news is that our protective factors in Lancaster County, our #1 was family attachment. So even if there's some dysfunction going on in a household, folks are attached and bonded. by majority. So that is hopeful. There's opportunities for social involvement now in this current climate. We know actually is now a risk factor because we don't have as much of that opportunity as we once had. Again, we're saved though by a belief in the moral order. So we have really strong faith communities in Lancaster County, and those faith communities are really critical right now in taking care of their congregations. You may or may not have heard of the Lancaster County Hayes survey. The Pennsylvania Youth Survey happens every 2 years, and it happens across the state. Schools can opt in or opt out. Elizabethtown School District did opt in, and we are currently awaiting what we call the county-wide data. And what that tells us is across Lancaster County, what kids are thinking and what they're doing with their time. Here, kiddos are telling us that alcohol and marijuana were higher substances of use, inhalants lower. We're expecting to see vaping and juuling pretty high, and then we take this data and sort of plan our services for the next 2 years. Another thing that we measure is in relationship to mental health. So we were already asking kids about stressful events in their lives, and again, that 2019 data will come out without considering the COVID-19 situation. This was issued to our kiddos in October of this year, all of 2019. So death was a pretty common negative experience, but there were kiddos worried about running out of food and skipping meals because of family finances. So again, these issues intensified because of the coronavirus situation. So we're hearing a lot right now about alcohol sales increasing. I think the last number I heard that the state was reporting was there's been a 62% increase in alcohol purchases across the state of Pennsylvania. So any homes with kiddos under the age of 21, obviously at risk because now they have increased access. Hopefully there's also increased supervision because families are huddled at home together. Let's see, we're also concerned about medical marijuana access. That has really been going up pretty significantly. Those numbers are more like increases closer to 70%. So folks aren't coping great. They're looking to a lot of substances, tobacco, marijuana, vaping. We know that folks who did that before coronavirus are at an increased risk because of the damage done to their physical bodies. We're taking a really close look at individual and community-wide trauma, which is also a risk factor because this is something that isn't just affecting clients, this is also affecting care providers and folks that had relationships with clients that weren't able to continue, that also left them feeling helpless and with grief. So it's definitely a unique time in our lives. So we're trying our very best to tap into homes. School work has continued. We've been able to take a lot of our work live via Zoom, and we're doing pre-recording via Zoom that schools are sharing back out. Workplaces are doing a lot of creative things to stay connected. I saw a partner organization was having a sock puppet Zoom meeting today. Everyone made a Zoom sock puppet of themselves. Rather than just being up on the screen together. So I thought that was a pretty fun way to start out the week. And like I had mentioned before, faith communities are really important right now. Compass Mark really believes that prevention is critical and that folks recover because treatment is effective. This is something we repeat over and over and over again. There's a lot of stigma surrounding substance use disorders, and we really feel like that is preventing a lot of healing from being able to happen. So despite some of the information I shared with you today sounding a little bit sad and concerning, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and this experience is just on one end. We're trying to really focus on what's next, how we can be there sooner than later, and how best to support all of the folks that we work with, so that when things get up and rolling, we can be back together again, and hopefully have minimized some of the impact and risk for families and communities. I'm happy to take any questions you guys might have. I'd encourage you all to pop over to our website and share us as a resource. We definitely have a decrease in help calls right now, which is not completely unusual. We don't get a lot of engagement with folks, like during the holiday season when there are other just pressing needs happening. Folks sort of get distracted, and the first thing they're thinking of is not, how can I go to a treatment facility for the next 30 days? So that is also the case now. And that means eventually they're all going to call, and probably at the same time. So if we can help folks now, we're happy to do so. Thanks for having me.
That was honestly, that was going to kind of be my question. My daughter is in psych at Lancaster General, and she talks about what they're seeing now. So you kind of answered, but what you're saying is what's existing now or what's happening now will eventually, I'll say, flow downstream to you, ideally, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. We're expecting that there's sort of like 4 preliminary waves of help that are going to happen. And we think we're only at number 2. So 4 we think will be the biggest, and that will probably be after we're in the quote unquote green zone, and working with those within those parameters.
I mean, you said a lot of this is hereditary with addiction. Is it the same? Like if you're an addicted athlete, is it the same as being an addicted marijuana user?
That's a fantastic question. So the brain system's exactly the same. I talked about the moment of choice for folks. There's also a substance choice or a behavior choice. So, and we do some work in the realm of gambling addiction, because while that's a behavioral addiction, it is still an imbalance of the reward system in our brain. And there's a significant amount of folks struggling with that, especially in the state of Pennsylvania. Right now we have extremely relaxed gaming laws, and not a lot of access to treatment. So there.
Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, going on addiction, I noticed you're saying that marijuana is addictive. I did, and that's Compass Mark's position that marijuana. Because I always thought that marijuana wasn't addictive.
Yeah, so really there's no such thing as something not being addictive, because it has to do with our brain, not the substance. So it may not be what I become addicted to, but it could be what someone else becomes addicted to. If you think back to sort of your years in high school, there were friends that smoked and friends that didn't. And then there were friends who could just stop and never smoke again. And then there were friends who smoked until they had lung cancer and needed to have chemotherapy, or perhaps lost their own lives. Those impacts are all personal and individual, based upon that one person's sort of whole map, and the way that things interact. So the answer is yes, it is addictive.
Going on that, I didn't see on your charts. Maybe I missed it, but did you show a chart on opioid addiction set in Lancaster?
Yeah, we do quite a bit of support for folks that have opiate use disorder, and we take a lot of help calls around that. Right now, our help calls are either opioid related or marijuana and alcohol with cocaine, sort of a co-occurring use. Those are our highest help calls right now. Joining forces, you may have, I think you guys heard of them because that was some of that grant money funneled over that way. That's sort of been a very well coordinated initiative across our county to try and control and get ahead of the opioid epidemic. And that on a chemical level is an extremely addictive substance.
Hey, Bevan, Jeff Marcico asked the question on the chat, is there a connection to addiction and household violence?
Yes. Yes, there is. Trauma, there is a direct correlation between trauma and addiction. Yes. The good news is that resiliency and protective factors can really, again, bring us back into balance. Just because we did experience that trauma doesn't mean that our stars are unchangeable.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, great.
One more question. This is David. Can you talk a little bit about relapse as part of the cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. Something that we're talking about a lot at Compass Mark, and I think the recovery community is really trying to inspire some deeper conversation about, is the fact that relapse is really a part of the recovery process sometimes, and that it doesn't mean that recovery was failed or treatment was failed. Sometimes it's something that just happens. It's almost like a reset. Can be really likened to someone who is experiencing diabetes and stops taking their medicine or isn't controlling their sugars. It's a moment where the person in recovery has to really have a strong recovery network to reach back out into and say, hey, wait a minute, I need some help getting back on track. I'm grateful to, in Lancaster County, we have a phenomenal recovery community. There's actually an organization, the Lancaster County Recovery Alliance, who drives a lot of that work. And folks that need help or are having a difficult time in their recovery definitely have a community to reach back out into to sort of hit reset. But yeah, we used to feel like, folks who had made it to recovery and relapsed, they were viewed very much as failures, and people used that as sort of a platform to say that no one can ever really heal or be healed. But it's not just true. It's just a process. Recovery is a process.
Okay, thank you very much, Bevan. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.